Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And welcome into another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, joined as always by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado here on this Sunday evening, a day after Oregon State defeats Arizona State 31-7 in the desert, closing out the road slate of the 2022 season. Angie and I are going to recap that here today and briefly look ahead to Saturday's showdown in Corvallis between a pair of bitter in-state rivals, the Beavers and Ducks, getting ready to do battle at Reser in 6 days from now. But first order of business is to recap Oregon State's win at ASU. Like I said, closing out the road slate on a high note and pushing the Beavers further up the top 25 as they get ready to close out the regular season. We're going to talk about the impact of that win at Sun Devil Stadium, talk about the cost, the injuries that has continued to be somewhat of a key storyline for this Oregon State football team down the home stretch. Then we'll go through all the stats, big plays of the game, what went well for Oregon State, what didn't, and then we're going to revisit our keys to the game as we always do. Angie, 24 hours after the eighth win of this Oregon State football season and only the second win at Sun Devil Stadium for the Beavers in the last 50 years.
That's crazy.
How are you feeling?
First of all, that was pretty sweet. I mean, the early game was nice. I got to watch a lot of other football. I watched the USC, UCLA, watched the Ducks and Utah. So kind of a nice chill day, but I did not realize that it was, I did, but I guess I kind of spaced it and heard it again. And that's wild. But what a game. Aside from a little kind of lull there in the second quarter, the Beavs pretty much dominated.
Yeah, it's the first win in Tempe since 2009. So obviously the first one for Jonathan Smith and company. But yeah, it's only the second win in Tempe since 1969, which that's I went through the history, the series history this morning, actually, just to kind of get my bearings on how long it had been since the Beavers had won a game there, because I knew that they were few and far between. But yeah, 2009 and 1969, those are the most recent two before this weekend.
Crazy.
Before we dive too deep into this game, have to give a shout out to our subscribers on YouTube. Thank you. We made it. 1,000 subscribers. If you're watching us live on the Damn Podcast, I assume you are subscribed by now. If you're not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button as we work towards 2,000. But we set a goal going into the year to finish the football season at or above 1,000, and we hit it here today on Sunday, November 20th. So thank you to all of the loyal listeners of the Damn Podcast who watch us live. We really appreciate you getting us to that plateau.
I feel like we should be like having some champagne or something, but
I knew that. So that's the thing. I knew we were close, but I didn't know if we were going to get there before we hit record. I kind of thought there was, the possibility that we might get there afterwards. But here I've got my water bottle here. I'll raise a toast to 1,000 subscribers.
And thank you, like Carter said.
On
and I just wanted
YouTube on YouTube.
On a second note too, I want to thank Carter because all of this YouTube live podcasting has all been his baby. So thank you, Carter. You're getting us. You're moving the needle.
Making the execs at 24/7 Sports happy, I'm sure.
That's
the
right.
commitment to video this year has been one of our points of emphasis. And again, we can't thank you guys enough for helping us achieve that year-long goal. That was one of BeaverBlitz's 2022 goals, was to increase our presence on YouTube. So you can find us there. If you watch or if you listen to the Damn Podcast on the podcast side, we really appreciate your support over there too. Of course, that's how this whole thing started, but we do have a lot of fun recording this on the video side as well. And if you're here watching us right now, as many of you are, go ahead and pop something in the chat. And if we have time at the end of the show, we'll answer some questions, and we'll hit on some comments throughout the episode as well. But speaking of this game in Tempe, again, Oregon State's 11th of the regular season. We're coming up here on the final game. It's, we're gearing up for bowl season now. It's kind of incredible how quickly things move as the year goes on. I will admit I'm kind of ready for a break. This is a grind for people who may not realize on the back end here how much stuff actually goes into covering a football season. So that period between the regular season finale and bowl season will come as a nice little treat. But
for Carter, but for me, then it ramps up for signing day. So then I kind of take over the load for a little bit. And okay, I just have to make a point, Carter, because I don't know about so I'm like a 47-year-old woman here, and my mom is like, so are you going to be around for Christmas? What are we doing for Christmas? I'm like, Mom, I don't know, because we have bowl game. It's first time, it's only the second time now in like a decade that we actually have to worry about bowl games and interfering with Christmas. So it was kind of comedy today when my mom called me to ask me about Christmas.
Yeah, last year, of course, that bowl game was on December 16th, 17th.
17th, yeah. So we were home
before the peak of the holiday season. But this year, if Oregon State goes to El Paso for the Sun Bowl, which again I still think is the most likely scenario. I've got a birthday on December 29th. I've got New Year's Eve on the 31st. I don't really want to be in El Paso for both of those, but I will not complain if it means I'm working and covering a bowl game for Oregon State, because of course over the last decade those have been few and far between, and I love my job, so there's that. All right, so Oregon State wins 31-7 in the desert. Never really a doubt, particularly in the second half. That's really when Oregon State kind of rolled in this thing, was in the third and fourth quarters. But with the win, let's talk about the impact here.
Yes.
Oregon State on Sunday moves up a couple of spots in the AP poll up to number 22. So the Beavers are at their highest point in that poll this season. Of course, this being the first season that the Beavers are ranked since 2013. They're 22 there, and they're number 22 in the coaches poll as well this week. And it's actually the first time they've been ranked in the coaches poll this year. Of course, they went into the Washington game, the Cal game, and the Washington game and the ASU game in the top 25 in both the AP and college football playoff polls, but had yet to cross that threshold in the coaches poll. They had been number 26 and number 27 there. So they get up to 22 in the eyes of the select coaches as well. And then the college football playoff rankings will come out Tuesday at 4 p.m. This time will not be sandwiched between two college basketball games. Thank you, ESPN. Angie, the odds of the Beavers cracking the top 20 there, because the Beavers did, they were ranked higher in the playoff rankings than in the AP poll. The handful of losses in that 15 to 20 range, I feel like the Beavs could be a top 20 team this week.
I do too. I think I was kind of thinking 18 kind of is where my head had landed when I was looking at who lost what. I think it's huge. And I think it was also big that the Beavers played early. That 11-15 kickoff, I think, did allow some coaches across the country or more people, more voters to see kind of what was going on in not in Corvallis, but yeah, what is going on in Corvallis.
Oh, let's not forget too. I mean, it really shouldn't be this way, but there is some influence between the polls. So, for example, these coaches who, to your point, have probably not seen a whole lot of Oregon State this year. Well, they suddenly flip on a Beav game and they see a number next to their name because they're ranked in the playoff rankings. And they're like, oh, wait, I've got to get them on my ballot if the committee thinks that they're ranked. So, one way or another, it was bound to happen. But to that end, if Oregon State is in the top 20, which I believe it will be in the CFP rankings, you're going to have a top 20 matchup in Corvallis this weekend at 12:30 on ABC. Easily the biggest game Oregon State has played in a decade.
Oh yeah, it's going to be big. It when I saw that 12:30 slot, it kind of took me back a long time to the 2000 Civil War
Mhm.
that was played. Joey Harrington, Jonathan Smith. That was a 12:30 kick with the great Keith Jackson on the call. That was a big game, and that's what I immediately thought of when I saw that 12:30 kick on ABC.
We have had plenty of afternoon kicks in this great series over the years, but not so many recently with I mean, this game's been relegated to Pac-12 networks in the
Yeah,
last couple of
yeah,
years, and so it's great to see it get back into the national limelight a little bit. But looking back on win number 8 and
yeah.
game 11, that win, being the 8th, guarantees Oregon State's best season in the 5-year Jonathan Smith tenure. It's best since 2012 when the Beavers won 9 games. And with that 8th win coming at this point in the season, the third 10-win season in program history is still on the table. So we are, I mean, Angie, it's no stretch to say we are potentially witnessing history watching this football season unfold. And the way Oregon State continues to play down the stretch, we could be watching one of the greatest Oregon State football teams of all time.
Yes, and I think with a little asterisk there that I think a lot of people need to take a quick step back too and be like, look where they came from. Look at where this team was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I can't stress that enough. I mean, I have not been around such a broken program when Jonathan Smith took over, and to see them now on the cusp of one of the better seasons in the entire program history is huge. And I mean, we're going to dive in here to ASU, the ASU game, but even doing so with so many reserves, I was really impressed with what we saw.
A little reminiscent, I think, of that quick turnaround at the beginning of the century. No, I mean,
Yeah.
just the fact that it has only taken 3, 4, 5 years, depending on if you count that 2022 or that 2020 season.
Yeah.
Oregon State has won more and more games on an annual basis if you throw out 2020, which I think pretty much everybody in this industry does at this point.
Yeah.
So, that continued upward trajectory, it still feels like the sky's the limit.
It does.
I know Oregon State is going to lose a lot of talent and experience, but there's really nothing preventing Oregon State from continuing to build upon this.
Well, don't you? I mean, you look at the guys that committed last year. There's some stars there, I think, in the making that maybe have been playing little special teams and being more scout team. I think of Donaldson. I think of Melvin Jordan. There's some guys that we're already seeing, guys like Martinez and
Dylan Lopez will be a
Dylan Lopez will be one. Jack Velling. So I mean, there's Quincy Wright. Yes, de-tackled Quincy Wright. So there's a lot of guys there that I'm really kind of excited to see. I'm also excited to see more of the emergence of an Easton Mascarenas Arnold and Skylar Thomas and some of those younger guys. But then you look at the guys that are expected to sign in December, and that's another whole level of talent that, you look at Kelsey Howard or Aiden Childs, and there's some really strong guys there too. So, I mean, you're right. It just seems like what Oregon State is building is so special. Now you got to keep those guys in play. You got to, keep guys on the roster, and that's where NIL is going to come into play. But I also think that the culture in Corvallis is so good. I don't think we see guys just bolting for more money.
No. I'm glad you called it like it is there too.
NIL, I mean that's what it is. Yeah, but then this. I was going to bring this up later, but I think this is going to be a big important part too. Okay. Is Trent Bray. Yeah. What that turnaround in 1 year with basically the exact same talent. Trent Bray is going to have a lot of suitors coming after him, offering him a lot of money for a lateral move. Now, I know he wants to be a head coach someday, and you cannot begrudge him that. He was a finalist for that Montana State job. But this is where Jonathan Smith, Scott Bahns, they need to go ahead and get him up to the 800,000-900,000. I know that sounds crazy, but that's where we're at in this world. I would love to see this defense under Trent Bray for like 2 or 3 more years and just see what he can do.
Yeah, we'll see if he's a semifinalist for the Broyles Award, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday that the semifinalists are announced, and then the finalists on the 29th, if I remember correctly. But he is on the short list of about 50 coaches currently as a nominee. Back to Saturday, Oregon State snapped a streak of road struggles as well, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, holding the Sun Devils to 7 points. Angie, good to see the Beavers kind of get off the schneid there on the road, right? Because I mean, even some of the wins Oregon State has had away from Reeser this year. You go back to that Stanford game against a team that looks like one of the worst in Power 5, needing a miracle to win that. Kind of a trend, losing it at UW as well. The Beavers just, again, we talk about this every week, but they have played so much better at home than on the road. But this week they really bucked that.
But I think that is, and this is something Eric kind of preaches all the time, is just how hard it is to get those road wins. I mean, I look at Utah. Utah did not look like the Utah that we've seen in Rice-Eccles against the Ducks. I mean, we saw struggles all across the board for them. I mean, you look at, Tennessee struggling at South Carolina. It's just really, really, really hard to win on the road in Power 5 football. So, yes, to snap that streak, to actually, pull out some wins, it's big, and it's big for confidence that these guys are going to start building the confidence that, we like playing at home, but we can win on the road too.
And I think it still, gives Oregon State a shot to play for something a little bit better than the Sun Bowl in the postseason too, particularly as much as Oregon State fans might hate to admit it, with Oregon beating Utah helps the Pac-12's case to potentially get 2 teams in the New Year's Six and potentially get one in the playoff with USC and maybe one in the Rose Bowl with Oregon. Washington's still up there knocking on the top 12. So not out of the equation for the Pac-12 to get 1, 2, potentially even 3 teams into the New Year's Six, which would do nothing but elevate Oregon State to the Las Vegas Bowl, the Holiday Bowl. That will all sort itself out over the next couple of weeks, of course, as that top 12 falls into place. All right, we have to shift to, I guess, something that's maybe not so glamorous with the injury tracker here. Again, it continues to be the story of the final third of the season for Oregon State, with so many guys going down and missing action. Let's run through the list of guys who did not suit up on Saturday. So that includes Jack Coletto, the hammer, Anthony Gould at receiver and punt returner, Jaden Grant and Alex Austin in the defensive backfield, Deshaun Fenwick at running back, and Tyler Morano on the offensive line. None of those guys played. Some of them were on the sidelines, and I believe some of them stayed back in Corvallis. Jam Griffin returned from his injury that held him out of the second half against California, but then he left again with another injury and was standing on the sideline with a boot. So he will likely be questionable on Saturday. Rajon Wright, also in the defensive backfield, left the game briefly. Nothing serious at all. Looked like he got his hand wrapped up or something in the locker room. Some people were even speculating that it was just a little bathroom break, but it was reported on the radio broadcast that he had his hand looked at, and it looked like he had it wrapped up when he got back onto the field. So he finished the game and by all assumptions will be good to go this week, but still a lengthy list of guys who were still holdouts after leaving that game against California. Yeah.
And then, like in our notes, Malik Kelly looked to be a very serious knee injury. Yeah. You saw the replay on that. It hyperextended backward. That looks like, something major.
I mean, not to speculate or anything, but that looks like, one of those ligament tear type injuries. And of course, Malik Kelly being a walk-on and one of those reserve guys wasn't, it's not like he's a starting caliber player or anything, but, one of those guys who I think makes a big impact on scout team. We always see him in practice as a second or third team guy.
Special teams was big.
He was moving.
But that injury list is big, and I know we're not going to get any kind of clarification. I have a feeling that tomorrow when Coach Smith meets the media, it's going to be very we're going to get day to day on all of those guys.
Unless, hey, you know what? We should get Chris Hudson to make a trip to Corvallis in the middle of the week, and maybe he can give us some insight on some of these guys.
Yeah. No, I think it's I expect that we get nothing this week. We are not going to know anything for either side. It's going to be a Coletto was on the sideline. I did see him. He wasn't suited. Yeah, Kelly was playing fullback for Coletto. Anthony Gould. I mean, I look at this guys and I think Jaden Grant. I mean, you like them all healthy, but.
And I think there could be an element of, like Oregon State was not overlooking Arizona State. I'll say
No.
that, but
No.
there is always an element of, all right, this game's not as big. We should be able to win without some of our key guys, type of thing going on in the coaches' offices. And maybe you get somebody who's on the fence to hold out and get them back to, if not, close to 100% for a much bigger game. I think that could be part of this, especially with a guy like Jack Coletto who even made the trip.
Yeah, and Anthony Gould and Tyler Moreno, though, those kind of concern me because those injuries happened during the week of practice, and I did hear about Moreno was a leg injury. So, Jam Griffin. Although, okay, Carter, I sent you this. This is totally going off topic, but Jam Griffin, did you see the bus ride home or the bus ride after the game? And I don't know if you've seen the TikTok video of the Vikings quarterback. Help me out. Kirk Cousins. Where he's like on the plane and he's like dripping in all their necklaces. Well, dude, they had Ben Goldbranson without a shirt on in all the guys' jewelry, including a big diamond crested necklace that said Griffin, and he was dancing, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
That's just top tier stuff, really. I mean, if you haven't seen it, go find it.
Yes.
I believe it was on Jam Griffin's Instagram.
Oh, there's a bunch of guys had it posted.
If I had handles off the top of my head, I'd throw them up here on the screen on YouTube, but I unfortunately don't. But easy enough to go find it.
Anyway, sorry. So Jam Griffin, no matter what's going on with his boot and everything else, he was still in very good spirits on that bus ride home.
Let's move into the stat book here, Angie, and look at the way Oregon State kind of dismantled Arizona State on Saturday. So, of course, final score being 31-7. It was about that lopsided in the yardage numbers as well, with Oregon State racking up 443 yards of total offense and holding, again, another opponent under 300 yards at 276. It's back-to-back weeks now of sub 300 yard play for an opponent. And really it was multifaceted. Arizona State didn't rack up a whole lot of yardage on the ground. 154 for the Sun Devils, but 122 through the air is pretty impressive, especially when you've got so many injuries in your defensive backfield. But let's look at the rushing numbers first, with Oregon State outgaining Arizona State 222 to 154 on the ground, led by Damian Martinez.
Stud. He's just a stud. I did see an interview with Easton Mascarenas Arnold. He wasn't happy that they gave up those 154 yards rushing. He said that they can do better. They had a couple breakdowns, but 222. And I just want to point out how balanced. I know we're going to talk about pass, but Oregon State rushed for 222 and passed for 221. Yeah. That's about as balanced as you're going to get for a stat line. So Damian Martinez, you guys know what I think of Damian Martinez. I've said it since the spring. So what got me, though, is I actually said this summer, and I remember it was my bold, because I usually don't go bold very often, but I said, could be the best freshman running back since Quiz. Well, now he might be the best freshman running back since Steven Jackson, because he is now it's the fifth straight game that he's had 100 yards rushing, hit the 100-yard mark, and that's first time since Steven Jackson did as a freshman.
Yep, back in 2003 when he did it 6 times in a row. Damian Martinez quickly, I said this in the top performers feature, which will go live at BeaverBlitz as soon as we finish recording here. I called him a freshman phenom, and I know that he's only really been the featured back for about 5-6 games now, but I would consider his play phenomenal. So I think he is. Jaquiz Rogers had the season-long numbers, and when we look back at 2022 for Martinez, he won't because it did take him a few weeks, a little over a month to get into that role. But on a per game basis, what Martinez is doing is as good, if not better, than what Jaquiz Rogers did as a true freshman back in 2008. Okay,
so but let me throw this one at you. How were you surprised? Ben Goldbranson had 9 carries for 36 yards. We knew that Ben could move and he's not a statue, but were you surprised at all that they unleashed that a little bit?
I'll tell you what, PM in the chat is in fact surprised. When did Ben Goldbranson turn into Cam Newton? Yeah, it was pretty remarkable actually to see what he did with his legs. And Angie, you and I can both attest to what he did in camp, both
I
in the
remember
spring
you and I
and in the
sitting by
fall.
each other, and we were like, okay, we knew he wasn't a statue, but we didn't know he could move that much. Now he's not.
Yeah.
He's not like you're not gonna confuse him with a dual threat guy. But do you think we see more this week against Oregon? We see him move a little bit more.
It's possible. I mean, I don't think they're going to dial up any read options, but they dialed up a quarterback draw that went 11 yards
Yeah,
for a touchdown. So,
yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest highlight plays of this game was just kind of seeing Branson barrel through there and make a guy miss and getting some good blocks. 9 for 36, and that's actually 47 sack adjusted yards too. So you take the
Yeah.
11 out for the 2 sacks he took, and he's close to 50 yards there on the ground. A lot of that I will admit was kind of just taking what the defense was giving him. Plays where ASU was actually covering pretty well downfield.
Yeah.
A little bit of a reflection, I think, on Oregon State's receivers not being able to get open. We'll touch on the receiving stats in a minute. But ASU, I think, again, not necessarily, I don't think there's a whole lot of respect out there for what Branson does with his legs, as there probably shouldn't be because he hasn't really put it on film yet. But he took advantage of what the defense gave him and consistently was picking up like 7 to 10 yards on some of those rollouts and scrambles. So
Did you think that was Ben's best game yet?
oh, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
He has improved week over week.
Yeah.
Save for maybe UW. I think that game maybe a slight step back from Colorado, but really over the last probably 4 to 5 games, I think we've come on here and said, oh, that was Ben's best game yet.
Yeah.
Ben looked as good as he's ever looked. And
I still don't think
that
he
continues
has
this week.
He's not the elite. He's not an elite quarterback yet. But I was, a couple weeks ago, I said, Oregon State is one good quarterback away from kind of making that next step. And I will say,
Ben's becoming that, I think.
Yeah, his pocket presence is he's getting way more savvy in the pocket. I think he looks just more comfortable out there.
For Arizona State, Valade took 13 carries for 109 yards and a touchdown and was incredibly efficient at 8.4 yards per carry. But he, again, like Jade Knott last week, got kind of game scripted into a smaller workload. And so I think Oregon State's run defense looked a little bit better in the final box than it did as the game was actually progressing.
I'm thinking game
scripted. They got saved a little bit there by the scoreboard.
I'm just thinking about Chris Hudson again, about being his fall, his fake injury was game script.
Yeah. Incredible stuff. The subtle digs, I'm sure, will seep through here as we are officially now in rivalry mode here on this Sunday. 6 days away. 6 days away, Angie. All right, in the passing game. So speaking of Ben Branson, what stood out the most to me about his passing performance was the start he got off to.
Yes,
so you look at the final line, he was 15 of 21. Well, he completed 15 of his first 17. And actually that started with, I don't have the consecutive completions to start the game, but I believe it was about 7 or 8 in a row before he threw his first incompletion. That's a 71% completion rate for the day, 188 yards and a touchdown with no picks. Again, kind of game managery in the passing game. But when you look at the whole body of work for Ben, I think it does come back to being his best start.
Yeah. I mean,
his career.
I mean, you look at that and it's not going to blow you away, the stats, but it was very workmanlike. He took care of the ball. I love, and credit to Brian Lindgren, because the first drive that Oregon State did, money. It was almost like he's been reading. That's what she said. I mean, we saw fly motion. We saw small little dump off passes, just getting the ball in the guy's hands in space.
And 2 of the biggest passing plays of the day, actually. On
exactly.
Drive.
And then it kind of went quiet. It was kind of like, Lindgren kind of took his little mid-game nap. But that third quarter, again, dialed up just beautiful play calls.
Tristan Gebbia came in for the final few minutes and went 3 for 3. So shout out to Tristan there. In the receiving department, Oregon State spread out its catches across 6 different receivers. 5 of them had multiple catches. Silas Bolden led with 5 for 54 yards, and Jack Velling at the tight end spot had the lone touchdown through the air for the Beavers.
And then how about, I was going to call out Tyjon Lindsey, because early in the game, he had a couple really clutch catches.
Yeah. Jeremiah Noga as well. I want to highlight in the game flow section. So we'll save that shout out for a few minutes. Trenton Bourget on the other side. Trenton Bourget. Sorry, I swear ASU has the most difficult names to pronounce in this conference this year. Trenton Bourget, 20 of 32 for 122 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Pretty impressive pass defense numbers for Oregon State, I think, considering the fact that Jaden Grant and Alex Austin were unavailable. Skylar Thomas stepped in. Ryan Cooper moved to the outside. Lots of guys stepping up there. And when you knew that Arizona State was going to be pass heavy when it got behind, to the Beavers' credit, they really shut things down on the back end there.
They did. And I would say they did miss a little step without Austin and Grant, but it wasn't horrible.
Held Elijah Badger to four receptions for 16 yards after Badger had been one of the top receivers in the Pac-12 in the span of the last couple of weeks. So impressive to shut him down without really your top corner in Austin. I thought Rajon Wright stepped up with one of his better, quietly one of his better games.
Yeah, one of his better. And then how about the punter?
Yeah,
let's talk punter because that punt by Luke, is it Locher? Locher was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, 55-yard bomb, and Arizona State's returner couldn't handle it, fumbled it. Skylar Thomas picked it up at the Arizona State 11, and then Oregon State capitalized 4 plays later with a field goal. That's a lone turnover in this game, actually. So it comes on special teams, not on defense. But impressive punt by Locher, the 55-yarder, and impressive by Skylar Thomas to not only lead Oregon State in tackles as a DB, but also to make that play on special teams. That guy was just getting it done in his first career start. Yeah,
that was exciting. And like I said, what a bomb. And I know we don't talk special teams a lot, but a great day for him. And he really is, a very big asset for this team.
It's first turnover-free game for Oregon State since Stanford on October 8th. So that's a month and a half of play with Oregon State turning the ball over at least once per game. And usually it was just one turnover. But the Beavers have a clean game down in the desert. And on the flip side, it's their 6th straight game forcing a turnover. So the Beavers continuing to kind of flip the script that haunted them for that 2-week stretch against USC and Utah, turning it over 8 times in the span of 2 games. It's really been a non-issue, and the Beavers continue to take it away defensively, just giving them more opportunities on the other side of the ball. And I think that's been key in some of these wins. Anything you want to add about pass rush here? I've got some notes later on in the show, but an opportunity here.
That still is a big missed opportunity, I think, for Oregon State. And I know before the season, there were so many people that were very high on Corey Stover, still not seeing what we need to see. So they're getting it done. The defense is getting it done, but that is one area that I really think needs to improve.
Yeah, just 1 sack for Oregon State, and I think it was always going to be difficult against Bourget, who is one of the better quarterbacks in the Pac-12 at avoiding pressure.
Yeah,
but on the flip side,
2.2 seconds. He gets the ball out like 2.2 seconds.
Yeah, it's about 2 exactly. And I thought one of the weaker games actually for Oregon State's offensive line going into the game, averaging less than 1 sack per game and right around 4 tackles for loss. They give up 5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. I guess that makes a little bit of sense because you're playing with some reserves there, and it wasn't like a terrible performance, but 5 TFLs and 2 sacks isn't something we're really that used to seeing in Oregon State's ledger.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. But again, several reserves in there, so they'll be getting their sea legs under them here soon.
Yeah, and I actually thought Tanner Miller had a relatively good game. He set a very key block on that Ben Branson draw play for the touchdown. So Tanner Miller, the walk on there, getting some action as a starter.
Yeah, and so you guys all know Peter Riley Osborne. He is our resident offensive line guru. He was texting me throughout the game, just like, Tanner Miller is a stud. If he can put on like 10 more pounds, he's going to be like a beast. So when Peter gets excited about an offensive lineman, it's definitely one to watch.
And Peter Riley Osborne's expertise on the offensive line is one of the many gems you'll find at BeaverBlitz.com, the place to be during Oregon State's football season, which, while it is coming to an end very quickly here, is still in full swing. And this is one of those weeks where you do not want to miss a thing because we've got all sorts of great content leading up to Oregon State and Oregon, the ranked battle at Reser Stadium. We're going to bring in some experts from Duck Territory, the 24/7 sports site for Oregon. We've got a ton of preview content coming on our end as well. And Angie, we've got a big promo coming up at the end of the week with Thanksgiving, Black Friday right around the corner.
We do. And I actually believe that is starting on Tuesday. So we are taping this Sunday night. Big promotion. It is the biggest promotion that we run of the year. 75% off an annual membership to BeaverBlitz. It works out to like $26 for the year. No brainer. If you're not a member, watch for that. It's like I said, it's coming, I believe, Tuesday. So you'll definitely want to jump on that and tell your friends, family, make great Christmas gifts. Definitely something you want to look for.
So we're not like actively telling you not to subscribe to BeaverBlitz here on Sunday or tomorrow on Monday, but you
might want to wait.
If you want that Paramount Plus subscription that comes with a full price subscription to BeaverBlitz, maybe you hop on now. But seriously, this deal that we've got for Black Friday and Cyber Monday is the best that you will find all year.
And you guys, seriously, so I know Carter mentioned it on Thursday, but BeaverBlitz is one of the fastest growing sites on the 24/7 network. So it's huge. So just the lodge just keeps growing. The game thread on yesterday was so much fun. I think we're up to 10,000 views on that bad boy. So definitely make sure you jump on BeaverBlitz because it doesn't stop when the season's over. So, and then you have bowl game and basketball, baseball, recruiting. It's kind of a year-round deal here for us.
That growth is totally a testament to everyone who has joined us this football season. We're very proud to be one of the fastest growing sites on the network, and we hope you'll join us to help us keep climbing that leaderboard. All right, let's move back into the action in Tempe. And it started with a 3-and-out for Arizona State, the Beavers defense kind of imposing its will. And then Josiah Irish stood back to return the punt with Anthony Gould out. And I thought this was an area to watch because Josiah Irish and some of the other guys who have stepped up as the backup punt returner in years past have struggled a bit. We've seen, that's where some of the muffed punts come from when somebody steps up. But Irish actually has a really good game in punt returns, brought 3 of them out and averaged, I believe, right around 13 yards per return. So shout out to Irish for stepping in for Gould. And then Oregon State's first offensive possession, as Angie was discussing earlier, was really just a masterpiece. I mean, a thing of beauty with Ben Gulbranson going 5 for 5, 51 yards on the drive, had a 15-yard pass to Silas Bolden, an 18-yarder to Jack Velling, and then Damian Martinez caps it off with a 5-yard touchdown. Angie, felt like that was maybe a little too easy for Oregon State's offense.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I just loved the mix of plays. Like I said, we saw lots of fly sweep motion. It was, like you said, it was about as perfect as a drive could go, and it almost went too easy.
Yeah. Arizona State did actually kind of counter with one of those drives as well, where it felt like the Sun Devils were moving it a little bit more easily than you'd like to see if you're the OSU defense. But then it stalls kind of right on they were on the edge of the red zone or got right into it. And they miss a 29-yard field goal off the right upright, which kind of became somewhat of a theme throughout this game. It was, to the kicker's credit, it was a windy day in Arizona. All right. It was, about 10 mile an hour sustained winds, and it can get gusty down there in the desert sometimes. But it felt a little demoralizing for Arizona State to come up without points on the drive where it had converted twice on 3rd down. It converted a 4th down and felt like the Sun Devils were kind of finding something on offense there.
Yeah. It was kind of a theme for the day as we watched. Like I said earlier in the show, I watched the USC UCLA game. We saw a couple missed kicks there. We watched Utah miss a couple kicks. It was kind of a trend. I don't know what was going on with kickers, but
at the same time, then you had the game-winning kick
exactly
in Waco with TCU, and then the game-winning kick at Michigan too. So I don't know. Kicking is it's weird.
Kicking is a weird thing. And Oregon State had its struggles too. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about Everett Hayes' struggles.
Yeah. In fact, on the very next drive, Everett Hayes goes slightly wide right from 44. It looked like it was going to miss by a bunch, and then it kind of curled back towards the upright, but no good nonetheless. And the Beavers actually could have had 7 points on that drive again. Silas Bolden making
that catch was
just an absolutely ridiculous catch.
And it was just out of bounds.
Just slightly out of bounds in the end zone. Would have been probably one of the biggest highlight touchdowns
Yeah.
of the season for Oregon State. That drive stalled at the 26, and then the 44-yarder was no good. A couple of drives that didn't really do much then in the middle of the second quarter, but at the end of the quarter and at the end of the half, we saw both teams really pick things up offensively.
Yeah, it was really the third quarter that thing. Well, I guess second quarter was Velling's touchdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, and before that, so Arizona State actually tied it with
right.
a minute 53 left in the half. Valade ran it in from 11 yards, but to set that up, Valade had that 39-yard breakaway run, which actually ended up accounting for almost half of Arizona State's rushing yardage.
Yeah.
Or I guess about a quarter of it, but nonetheless, a big play for Valade, who is the active career-leading rusher in college football. So you knew that he was going to get his numbers and he was going to get his touches, but that 11-yard rushing touchdown was the only points that Arizona State would manage. But how about the response, Angie, for Oregon State to go 53 seconds down the field and to find Jack Velling on really it was either busted coverage or just a really
he was just wide open. Yeah. No, it was such a great answer because Oregon State had kind of been, I don't want to say dominating, but again, it didn't feel like it was going to be close, even though the score was tied. And for them to answer, boom, it was beautiful. And like I said, Velling was like no one around him.
Yeah. There were a lot of possessions at the end of that half, and ASU actually had time with 53 or with exactly a minute left to turn it over on downs. And then Oregon State got the ball back with 2 timeouts. Gulbranson takes a sack, and Oregon State lets the clock expire. But
were you disappointed with that? Because I was.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, because Oregon State was on about its own 40. Felt like you probably need 30 to 40 yards to get into field goal range, but that's pretty doable with 26 seconds and 2 timeouts.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with just the way that, for Jonathan Smith, who can be kind of a gambler and really want to take advantage of, that was a chance to really, right before half, you go up 21-7. That would have been huge. And of course, Ben Gilbranson does the one thing he really couldn't do in that position, but they still, no time. It was just kind of a letdown, I guess was the word I'm looking for. Letdown.
I guess on the flip side, you don't want anything disastrous to happen and ASU to tie things back up, but it did have the feeling of an opportunity for Oregon State. And even with the sack, you've got 2 timeouts, you have a chance to keep moving, to keep things moving. And you choose not to, but in the end, didn't matter. That point. Oregon State had already scored all of the points it needed to by the time the teams went into the locker room, and then they padded the lead very early after coming out of the locker room with Damian Martinez's second touchdown of the game. This one a 12-yarder, and I think to go 83 yards on your first possession of the second half was kind of a crushing blow to Arizona State, considering at that point it's a multi-score game. They got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I just love that drive, especially highlighted just how good Martinez is, even with contact. Just the ability to take a hit and either bounce off or drag guys with him, unreal.
And on that touchdown too, he wasn't necessarily contacted a ton, but you saw his elusiveness and his vision. He was kind of weaving through defenders there for 12 yards. It was an impressive run. And one of the knocks that we had, or that we highlighted against Martinez as he was working his way up to the RB1 role throughout the season, particularly in those first 3-4 games, was it felt like he didn't have that strength and that vision at the point of attack where he would maybe miss a cut, or he would have a lane that the O-line opened up for him and he wouldn't take it, or he would get hit and wouldn't fight through it. And we said, all right, that's not the Martinez we saw in camp. Well, the Martinez we saw in camp was the guy who has looked very much like the one we've seen over the last 2 months. So I feel like we've seen progress there.
Yes, absolute progress. And I think that's maybe why it took him a little bit longer to earn that RB1 role. The next drive, ASU turned over on downs. So she got the second time. And then that led to Gulbranson's big run.
Yeah, and going back to that run, so JRU1 in the YouTube chat asked if it was Jake Levengood with a key block on that play. And actually, now that I think of it, I think you're right. It came from the center position, and I always think of Tanner Miller. I always think of Tanner Miller as a center because you and I, Angie, we always see him playing that position in practice. I mean, he's been the second team center for the last 3 years now in camp. So it came from the center position. That's why I said Miller, but we do have to give Jake Levengood his credit because he made the play there that got Goldbranson into the end zone on an 8-yard quarterback draw for somebody who really by nature is a pocket passer. I thought that was excellent play design and play calling by Brian Lindgren to notice that, hey, this guy's got the hot hand. Let's just let him run it, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, moving to the fourth quarter. Again, Arizona State was just doing nothing with the ball in the second half. And I think at that point, the Sun Devils had gotten really one-dimensional. And that's when we saw Oregon State pull away from Cal as well, is when you know that opponent is going to pass the ball. They don't have the ability to take the time to give it to their star running back in Valladay. And again, with Oregon State having injuries in the secondary and going up against a team that has Jalen Conyers at tight end, who has really stepped up recently, and Elijah Badger at receiver, who's been one of the more electric guys at that position in the conference over the last month, I thought it was pretty impressive that, again, Oregon State forces Arizona State to punt. And then Irish with one of his nice returns for 13 yards to open the fourth. And then on the flip side, so Oregon State has to punt, and that's where the turnover came. Yeah. Let's highlight that play again because Skylar Thomas, he deserves all the credit in the world for stepping up the way he did in his first career start, picking up that fumble.
He led the team in tackles too. So no, huge game for him. But yeah, just to be that aware and to hustle down the field. I mean, ASU's return guy had to turn. He turned kind of sideways because the punt was boomed over his head. Yeah, just great discipline by Skylar Thomas on that play.
So the Oregon State gets the ball at Arizona State's 11, and it felt like one of those opportunities to to really put the game on ice with a touchdown. They do have to settle for a 26-yard field goal, which Hayes made with 9:38 left in the game. Makes it 31-7. That's the final score. But one more play to highlight at the end of this thing, or actually a couple, because I want to give Jeremiah Noga his shout out. Everett Hayes missed a 23-yard field goal off the left upright after a 13-play, 8-minute and 12 drive in which Jeremiah Noga made one of the best catches of the season. And for a walk-on who's waiting for his opportunity and who's been here for a couple of years, came in with Sam Vidlak from Hidden Valley, and to stick it out, I think, and to continue to wait for his opportunity. Angie, you and I have seen him make some plays in practice. He ends this game with 2 catches, and one of them was, again, like I said, that one-handed over-the-shoulder type catch for a big 4th down conversion, I believe, correct? Or third? It was third or fourth. One of the best plays by a walk-on this year, actually, in my opinion.
It was huge. And I think that might have been the play that Malik Kelly got hurt, too.
That one was later on.
Okay. His nickname is Supernova. He's bright. He shines bright.
I like it. I like it.
No, it was good. It was good to see. I do like seeing these guys, the reserves, be able to get in the past couple games just because they do work so hard and really kind of get a chance.
Okay, so let's talk about that 23-yard field goal, though, which was Oregon State's final play from scrimmage. Your thoughts on the state of Oregon State special teams, particularly when it comes to field goals?
Yeah. Like I said, here you have Hayes, who is probably one of the more talented kickers in the conference. Kicking is one of those things. So much of it is mental.
Yeah.
It's kind of like putting to me. You get the yips and you kind of have to. So I don't know what you need to do. I don't know if you need to go watch a little Tin Cup or what you got to do because it's a mental thing because these are easy chip shots for him.
And that, I think, has been one of the stories of Hayes' career where you can rewind last year to the game at Colorado where he hits just an absolutely remarkable 60-yarder one of the longest, or the longest field goal in Oregon State history, one of the longest we've seen at the college football level, frankly, in quite some time, to send that game to overtime in a clutch spot. He's got the leg power. We know that. I've seen him make 60 to 65 yarders in practice before too, but it feels like it's that 30 to 40 range that for whatever reason, very rarely do we see him miss a 23-yarder. And I'm curious if that was either a confidence thing or if the wind did kind of just whip up a little bit on that one. I'm willing to give him a pass on that, but on the broadcast, I believe they said he's 1 for 6 on kicks of 40 yards or more this season, which, as a college kicker, I get it, but it's still not going to get the job done, because those are 3 points that Oregon State's going to need to have in all of these close games that it's played. Yeah.
I mean, especially when you consider that Oregon State, they've been in some close games, and those points matter. So like I said, I don't know. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if it's still his leg. I think his groin's all healed. I think a lot of times kickers, though, like I said, they almost get in their own head, and it's kind of getting past that mental break is what's going to get him over the hump. Maybe he needs to sit down and chat with Cerna a little bit.
I'm going to use this as kind of a segue into our section where we talk about some of the things that Oregon State didn't do particularly well, some of the areas of struggle. And number one for me was the kicking game. A couple of missed field goals that again, in a game against Oregon next week, or going back to USC and Washington, those are 3 points you're going to need. In addition to that, I felt like, at least on a per carry basis, Oregon State's run defense took a step backward. And again, this comes down to you're playing against arguably, without a doubt, the most productive running back in college football. I don't know if talent-wise we're talking about one of those high-end guys, but somebody who has the production to his name. And you're on the road where Oregon State hasn't played very well defensively. Curious how much of it is due to that and how much is due to something else. But I felt like Oregon State's run defense, while the end of game number might not look terrible, watching it in real time, Oregon State's run defense wasn't that good today.
It wasn't that good. And what also another point that I kind of noted in my notes was 3rd and 4th down defense.
Yep.
That's kind of where they picked up their big chunks. And it's 2 weeks in a row, because we saw, was it Cal that they gave up some big runs? No, because they only gave up 9 total yards. So it must have been the game before that, or Washington. It was Washington that we saw the 3rd and 4th down defense really, really struggle.
Yeah,
they need to close those out.
So again, one of those situations where the end of game numbers look better. Arizona State, if I remember correctly, converted on about 35% of its third downs and 2 of 4 on 4th. But it was early on. But it was early on that ASU, when this game was still a game. And ASU wasn't one-dimensional and whatnot. That's where those struggles came from, and I completely agree. I put that in my notes as well.
Yeah, I made note of that, and it wasn't as bad as Washington, because I think at Washington it was a 61% clip that they were allowing 3rd down conversions. But those are a couple. The run D and tightening down the 3rd and 4th down defense is really going to be something that, especially going into Oregon and a bowl game, they really need to tighten that up.
Pass rush as well. Oregon leads the nation in sacks allowed. That offensive line is one of the most elite groups I have seen. It's either 2 or 3.
2 or 3, yeah. So
and Oregon State only gets 1 against ASU, which again, Trenton Bourguet, one of the absolute best in the Pac-12 at getting the ball out quickly. But still, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold again had a huge sack, though, a 7-yard loss on a 3rd down play. So shout out to him there. But overall, you get the 5 quarterback hurries, but that means nothing if he's completing the pass or if he's picking up yards with his legs. You have to get home on some of these guys, and Oregon State just continues to come up short time and time again.
And that was with John McCartan back this week. I thought we might see a little bit more pass rush. You want to talk keys to the game?
Let's actually let's shine a light on a couple of things that went well for Oregon State too, just so that we're not like completely trashing them here. We've talked about Ben's rushing ability.
Yeah,
I thought that was probably my biggest takeaway from the game, actually, was just that he's looking more and more like a dual threat guy week by week. But defensively, for as much as the pass rush was, again, just not very good, and for as much of a step back that I thought the run game took, or the run defense took, Beavers allowed 7 points on the road. So, they're getting it done one way or another. And now you look at the last 2 weeks, that's 10 points the Oregon State defense has allowed over the last 2 games. 5 points per game over a 2-week stretch for the Oregon State defense is absolutely remarkable.
It is completely unreal. So I agree. I think sometimes it's easy to maybe dwell on some of the things that aren't going well, but at the end of the day, they're getting it done. But
2 other things I want to highlight.
Get a lot harder.
Yeah, 2 other things I want to hight, and we'll move quickly here at the end of the show. Sustained drives offensively. Oregon State had 4 drives of 9+ plays. 3 of them went for at least 10. One of them, as I said, I believe went for 13. And then they scored twice on 4-play drives. So really, when they weren't moving the ball and stringing plays together, it's because they were scoring very quickly. So credit to Oregon State's offense for stringing things together, because going into the game, one of my concerns again was inconsistency in the passing game, especially on third downs, not being able to move the chains. Really took care of business there.
Absolutely. And on the road, like we talked about, it's just hard to win on the road. And looking at that and being able to sustain drives is going to be crucial as we get. I know.
So look at this. Look at this comment from Eric F. Ben runs like an angry baby deer, effectively awkward. I love it. Comment of the year, potentially.
Yeah, that is pretty good. An angry baby deer.
Effectively awkward. I like to think of my podcasting ability as effectively awkward. Yeah, I'm using that. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for that gem. One more thing to highlight before we touch on keys to the game and get out of here. Oregon State's just general ability to take care of business this year has been something that, frankly, we haven't really seen from an Oregon State team in quite some time. The Beavers have now beaten every team that Vegas has projected them to beat. When you look at the lines, anytime Oregon State's a favorite, they've gotten it done. And really, they've done it in convincing fashion more often than not, particularly in these last 2 games against California and Arizona State. But teams past, there have been those letdown games, and we're sitting here in week 13 now. Oregon State doesn't have a single letdown game to its name. Its only losses now are to teams that are in the top 15. A really impressive resume. And when they've got an opportunity for a quality win this coming weekend.
Yeah, a quality win this weekend. And when you look, I guess I dwell on this too much, but 2 of those games against Washington and USC were by a combined 6 points that they lost. It kind of hurts, but it just shows you just how close they are.
We're going to come back and review the season in a couple of weeks or, a month after the bowl game. And I think we're going to come away really impressed with what we see in some of these season-long numbers, particularly with regards to that resume. I mean, Oregon State just it hasn't gotten that quality win, and it doesn't have an upset win like it normally does, but never before have I seen an Oregon State team beat up on the teams it's supposed to beat up like it has this year. All right, let's get out of here with our keys to the game revisitation. So, Angie, you started things off on the offensive side saying that Oregon State needed to establish the passing attack because ASU would stack the box. When you look back at what you said Oregon State needed to do in that regard, how do you feel about it?
I feel good. I love that we saw Oregon State doesn't need to go deep downfield every time, but they were effective in using the kind of the short slants, screens, getting those chunk plays and stringing things together. It was super effective, and it was getting the ball into playmakers' hands in space.
My key offensively was, again, we kind of had contrasting keys this week. Mine was to impose, for the Beavers to impose their will in the running game, sustain drives, via the ground game and score with that rushing attack. And I think that's a resounding yes. To run for 222, for Damian Martinez again to cross that century mark, averaging 5.3 yards per carry. Pretty solid mark for the Oregon State offense, and a testament again to the work that line does in opening up some lanes. But again, just another shout out to Ben Goldbranson for adding what he did there. So to the point about scoring via the ground attack, totally 3 of the 4 touchdowns came on the ground. And then they sustained drives as well with that improved passing game anyway. So my point on that was kind of moot, but
it was very balanced. And that's, Coach Riley always preached about a balanced attack. And so this was, like I said, 222 to 221 run to pass yards. About as balanced as you're going to get.
Let's flip to the defensive side, Angie.
Yeah. I wanted to see more pressure on Bourget, and I know it was going to be hard just because he does get that ball out so quickly. But I still haven't seen enough from the pass rush, and I wanted to see them do better. Not great. I would say that was a fail. Just one sack.
Not
super impressive.
So I'll counter with this. They pressured him. They blitzed him. They sent the house a couple of times, but they just didn't get home. And, Oregon State did get into the backfield quite a bit, but even then, not every time they were credited with a quarterback hurry because he is so good at getting it out quickly. So, no, I agree that they came up short in that regard.
And you nailed yours. Yours was to lock down the wide receivers downfield.
Totally did that. I thought even with, again, some of those injuries in the defensive backfield, only 4 passing plays of at least 10 yards for ASU, and the longest went for 21. That is the definition of locking things downfield when you're not giving up more than 10 to 15 yards very often. 3 pass breakups on 32 pass attempts too is not an incredible ratio, but again, Oregon State is leading the Pac-12 in that category and remains one of the best in the country at getting into the passing lanes and knocking the thing down. And I think also too, you didn't see the coverage sacks that you might normally see when you have a front 7 that can get home. But the Beavers did force Trenton Bourget to scramble a couple of times as well, and that comes back to the secondary too. So resounding yes on locking down the receivers downfield. Anything to add, Angie, before we call it quits on this Sunday?
Carter, 8-3. 1 more game to go, or 2 more games to go. They can still hit my 10-win mark.
I might have internally called you a little crazy when you predicted that at the beginning of the year, but with 2 games left this year, it's still on the table. And
this has been my best year in all phases of between Martinez, between the defense being good. All my predictions are coming true. So my best year yet. Taking me a while to get there, but I'm on it.
Angie looks like a genius.
I try.
They're making her look smart out there.
They are making me look smart.
All right. I think that's going to do it here. We've talked enough Sun Devils, and we're getting ready to move on to Oregon State and Oregon. The rivalry, it's you can feel it. You can feel it after that game went final in Eugene late Saturday night. You could feel the tides kind of turning, and like, all right, it's go time.
Yeah, Duck fans don't think Oregon State is their rival though, but yeah. And I will still use the term Civil War. Carter will not, but it is a big rivalry game, and excited for this one. I don't think we've had one that means this much yet in years.
I'll say this, call it what you want. I mean, I have no problems with anyone calling it the Civil War. I still am in the boat that, that changing this name was, maybe less of a necessity than it was made out to be. I think it gets a little political sometimes, so I'll tread lightly there. But again, my decision not to use the phrase Civil War comes from the universities not recognizing the game as being called the Civil War, and I want to maintain the integrity of upholding what the university wants. But if anyone ever puts it in
Angie
print,
doesn't care, and Angie sees that former players are still calling it the Civil War, so that's what Angie's going to do.
And if anybody puts it into print, good on them. Like I respect you putting it out there, because I want to see it come back. I want to see this game be called the Civil War. I will say that. I'm just not going to call it that until it's officially titled it. And unfortunately, I don't think it ever will be. I don't see the universities readopting it, but maybe eventually we'll get to a point where that it becomes a little bit more accepted again. But it is still the Civil War in my heart.
And
So
Eric,
just because you won't see it in writing with me on the byline, it doesn't mean that I'm not still calling it the Civil War behind the scenes.
Yes, and Carter doesn't get mad. Like I said, we don't want to turn it into a political battle. It's not. It's just what it is. And
it just is what it is.
Yeah. And see, I guess I come from a place that it's Civil War, meaning it's civil, like civility. You have ducks and beavers in the same house. But like I said, we're not going to get into debate it. It is Civil War week, baby. And it's go time.
Don't you forget it. If there are any houses divided out there watching this podcast,
Carter, I love
you're...
Twitter. So I mean, you guys, my audience is Beaver fans. I mean, seriously, that's who I talk to, Beaver fans. And it's funny, like I made a Twitter comment yesterday about the ugly Sun Devils uniforms. And I said they're right on par with Oregon's. And I had Duck fans coming out of the woodwork. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm not talking to you. Like, go away.
You know what? I give you and everybody listening and everybody in this state of Oregon my blessing to go and just dive into this rivalry. If you're in a house divided, if your husband, your wife, your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, kids are affiliated with the university that you are not, just go at it. Have some fun. This is, I love at the end of the day, this is what this week is all about. It's all about,
I do like Oregon State
the rivalry
players.
and having fun with it.
I think it was Kyrie Fisher. He doesn't even refer to them as the Ducks or Oregon. It's those guys. Those guys. So maybe
that's coming from someone who didn't even grow up on this side of the Mississippi. So
yeah, and Easton Mascarenas. I mean, those guys are excited. Like, it's go time in Corvallis.
Now I'm trying to think if Arkansas is west or east of the Mississippi River. Ooh, the geography skills are being tested here.
He's from Oklahoma, though, originally. So that is.
You're right.
West.
Right. All right.
But yeah, those guys. I'm just going to call them those guys.
It back. He's not from Oregon.
Those guys.
It's going to be a fun week, isn't it?
It is going to be a fun week. It is going to be a fun week. And
just another reason for everyone to head to BeaverBlitz throughout the week.
We'll be back, Wednesday?
Yeah, I think officially for the podcast, we're going to come back on Wednesday. We'll make that official at some point throughout the week and make sure everybody knows. But thank you to everyone who has joined us on this Sunday, and stay tuned for what day we go live and record this thing, because it won't be on Thursday. I can guarantee you that, with Thursday being Thanksgiving. Even on Thanksgiving, we'll have some content up at BeaverBlitz. So if you need something to digest your food to, head over there. Conversation in the Lodge is going to be absolutely great this week, with it being such an important week in so very many ways. Angie, let's convene in the middle of the week to preview what is probably Oregon State's biggest game in a decade. How does that sound?
Sounds great. I'm excited.
Until then, you can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns, and we'll talk to you most likely on Wednesday for another episode of the Damn Podcast.